Okay, guys, fight commentary breakdowns. This is probably fight commentary chats, but we'll see. Hey, Rokas, how you doing? Rokas from Martial Arts Journey.
I'm doing great. Really good to be here with you and talk again.
Definitely. So this is Rokas' time on my channel because I've been on his channel. So if you guys haven't seen that talk, please follow the card. So Rokas, let's just go ahead and start with the event that you're putting on, this seminal, awesome event. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, so the name of the event is the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship. The whole premise of it is I gathered four more martial arts YouTubers, including myself. Pretty cool people like Icy Mike, Sensei Seth, Jeff Chan, and Ramsey Dewey. And then we're gonna all meet in Sydney in an elite self-defense school, which actually has access to a whole warehouse. And the warehouse is pretty badass. There's like a cinema, like a cinema theater room, a basketball court, like various rooms. Like it's pretty awesome. And then the building is going to be destroyed in a while, and so we can do anything we like there. We can pretty much destroy it. So a lot of challenges are going to be happening there. Maybe I can speak about more about them in detail later. But the whole idea is that we're going to have seven challenges, and they're going to be scored by judges for each one of us individually, and then we're going to have a scoreboard, and eventually we'll see who's the ultimate self-defense champion.
Wow. So who are the judges?
Right. So the judges, first of all, I have to mention the co-host, Jeff Phillips. He's the owner of the self-defense school called Western Combatives, and he's really cool dude, really badass. He has been doing this for a lot of years, and he's very much focused on like self-defense, which really works, pressure testing, and doing all of these scenario drills. And he has a lot of experience working with that himself, and he has a whole group that he leads and runs. And then once in a year, they do this sort of a tournament championship for themselves. And so he has a lot of experience with conducting these events. And he gathers a group of people. From what I understand, it's people who are also involved in the self-defense program. So they also have the experience, they also have the knowledge, and then they have like a very strict way of looking at certain criteria, what worked, what didn't work. And it's really difficult. We spoke with Jeff about this. It's really difficult to score such events because to some degree they're subjective, but that's where they really are going to be focused on looking at various criteria, like even I think including like the size difference and the creativity behind what the person did, how well he physically stood out, how was his like decision making process in it. We're gonna record everything, and they're gonna look at the footage of each participant doing the challenge, like pretty much like in slow motion. So it's really gonna be kind of very responsibly done to make sure that whoever gets the points, they get the points for a good reason.
Wow. And I assume this is going to take place over multiple days, right? This is like a
Yeah.
week long or 2 week long event?
So we're planning to get it all done in 3 days, ideally. Like there's gonna be some prep work. We're all meeting a couple days before. Like we have a sponsor who's going to gear us up. Like we'll have like the whole armory and everything so that nobody would get hurt. So we're gonna do some fitting with that, making sure everyone is covered. Doing some prep before that. But then once the filming starts, as I mentioned, like 3 days. So about two to three challenges per day, which is doable. Some of the exercises is going to be pretty intense, so I think the plan is to leave the super intense ones because like a couple or at least one is going to be super intense. So that's probably going to be the last one, so that everyone burns themselves out, and then it's like okay, we're done. And that the first day you wouldn't, get well. I'm pretty sure no one is going to get injured, but the plan is to start slow, get into the rhythm, do one challenge, take a break, get some lunch, recover, do another one, and then kind of schedule them for the day. And so there's seven challenges, and there's actually one extra super special event that I'm super excited about, but I can't tell what it's going to be. It's going to be a surprise for everyone involved besides myself. I unfortunately have to know about it because I'm going to plan the filming, but it's going to be super super cool. Like yeah, again, can't tell too much. So eight challenges in total. So a couple, two to three per day, and I think we should be able to tackle that. And also, actually, this is the first time I'm mentioning this. Is this is on record, secret revealed on a Saturday in Sydney. We're gonna organize because the filming is gonna be on other days. But then on a Saturday, we're gonna organize a joint seminar by all the YouTuber participants. So Jeff Chan is gonna teach a segment. Ice Mike is gonna teach a segment. Sandy Seth is gonna teach a segment. So we're gonna do like an open seminar so that anyone can join and experience our teaching on that day. So that's gonna be like an extra day where people could get to meet us. So that's pretty cool. And this is the first time I'm letting everyone know that that's actually official.
Well, I am honored that you announced it on this interview. Now, I think a good question I have is, so the other reveal, the other spoiler you can't give away right now, are you going to tell the people who help crowdfund?
Right. It's a good question. So the thing is, there's certain challenges which we are revealing, so that people could get behind the crowdfunding more easily, so that they would know eventually, essentially, what they're investing in and more or less what's gonna happen. At the same time, we want to have that element of secrecy because we don't want to leak it, especially to the participants, because we want that element of okay, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And the trouble is, which I want to tackle right away, is I'm involved in the organizing and I'm also a participant. So that kind of gives me an upper hand. But at the same time, we made an agreement with Jeff Phillips, the core organizer, that he's not going to reveal some of the key details for me. And he's going to have some curveballs ready so that I would know certain elements as well, so that I would be surprised and I would be caught off guard too. So we're gonna try to make it as even as possible. But so Jeff Phillips, he's gonna know every little thing. I will know a big part of it, but I will still be missing out certain stuff. But ideally, and then the participants, they will know a little bit. The supporters will know a little bit, but we're still keeping it all. A part of it as a secret so that there would be as much of a surprise to the participants and even for people like watching and seeing these videos released. There's going to be a moment of, oh crap, this is happening, this is so cool. So we want to have that effect too.
I see. I see. So, how is the second crowdfunding doing?
So it's a whole story behind it. I'll make it into a short story.
Mm-hmm.
But I like stories in general. I think it's always nice to kind of tell a story of how things happen
Yeah.
versus like it's doing great or
Yeah.
bad or
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
because so many things are relative and subjective. So starting off, the first crowdfunding did pretty well. Helped the organizing the event a lot, although I didn't reach the amount of money which would have taken care of everything. So there's a lot still on my shoulders, but the first crowdfunding helped a lot. But then I got contacted by a number of people, but in particular, Jordan teaches jujitsu. He's a content creator who's growing pretty well on YouTube, BJJ based, although he had some MMA fights. Uh, Really good content, and I think he's gonna be one of those big channels pretty soon enough. And now already he has over 100,000 subscribers and got to that pretty quickly. So anyway, kudos to him, great guy. And then he actually mentioned that he'd be really interested to join. But the thing is, I was already maxed out by how many participants I can invite and cover for, because I'm taking all the financial responsibilities on myself. And so I came up with this idea because I did want to give him an opportunity to participate. So I said, you know what, let's do this thing. Let's organize an additional crowdfunding where we can announce it to our followers, and then if we get a certain amount of money, then we'll use that money to get you to join us as one of the participants. So it was kind of an all or nothing. Let's give it a shot, and we were hoping for better results. Especially, I think Jordan was expecting a bit more support from his followers, I think. And the crowdfunding didn't do too well. We got a small portion of the money. So the participation of Jordan is still on the question. There's still a few days left. So if anybody wants to be the game changer and change that, it's possible. But even so, whatever amount we're going to gather, even if Jordan can't make it, still every dollar makes a difference, because again, there's a lot of things that need to be covered, like hiring videographers and getting the gear and prepping the facility and flights and so many things that need to be covered. So every dollar makes a difference. So that no matter how much the second crowdfunding gets, I'm super extremely grateful for whoever chips in, and whatever we get, it's that's great.
I see. I see. I'm looking at your crowdfunding page right now, and you call yourself a journeyman too. I think you deserve more than that now. You know, I would call you beyond a journeyman. Like,
Right.
consider myself a journeyman, but you have done fights like in the cage and stuff. So I would give you more credit. I mean, journeyman, that's cool, but I think you're beyond the journeyman now.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that idea. You know, it's an interesting place to be in because looking at my background, I started off as an Aikido sensei. Well, that was the start of my career. I was running a professional dojo. I was the sensei. Everyone is bowing to me, and I'm the third degree black belt. I know things, and everyone's looking for information. And I was running my Aikido tutorial channel. Like that's how I started my YouTube channel. It was like Aikido tutorials, and it was doing really well in regards to like the Aikido niche. So I was kind of the expert of that field, and I wasn't the best. I didn't know everything, but I knew more than a beginner. So I was sharing knowledge, and then as a lot of people know, I quit Aikido, closed the dojo, dropped my title, and suddenly I wasn't an expert anymore and I couldn't really. It was a funny place to be on YouTube as well, and maybe we share part of that journey where I'm not. It's much easier for, let's say, Icy Mike or Jeff Chan or Ramsey Dewey. They have an extreme amount of gathered knowledge about their field, which they're still part of, and they can just make tutorials and talk about things, and they're in a great place. I went through a journey and that's the decision I made to become the journeyman, where it's like, okay, you know what? I know stuff about Aikido, but to me it's somewhat becoming irrelevant or became irrelevant. And I'm like, I want to learn more. And I put myself in that position of a journeyman, and it's a really enjoyable place to be, especially after teaching for quite a while. I was running my pro dojo for 7 years, and it was really like intense to do that. I burn out a number of times doing that. And suddenly I'm like, I'm the student. Like I don't need to explain anything to anyone anymore. So that was a great place to be, really enjoyable. And I think I got used to being the student. And so I still see myself as the journeyman because it kind of reminds me of a funny conversation I had at the very beginning of my Aikido training when I was in my teens. I met a karate guy, and I still didn't know anything about martial arts. I was just learning, and I was asking about belts, and I learned, and he told me that if you have a black belt in Aikido, you don't have a grade in karate. And being as naive and young as I was back then, I was like, "What? If you're a black belt in one martial art, that should give you like at least a certain rank to other martial art." But the truth is, no matter how good you are at a certain thing, if you go to a different thing, you're gonna be the noob. You're gonna be the nobody, and you're gonna have to learn from almost pretty much ground zero. So I embrace that aspect, and I know that my plans even now in the near future is to go meet some amazing experts. And it's like I haven't tried that martial art ever. I know some stuff here, I know some stuff here, I know some stuff here, but it's like I'm still the journeyman. So yeah, summing it up all. I guess I know much more than I did 3 years ago, but I think it's possible to be a journeyman for the whole life and have a blast with it.
That makes sense. And one story I'll tell you
Yeah,
about this related is when I took Shinigami to my capoeira class, right? And I thought because Shinigami did karate, he's fought in street beefs and done other types of fights, I thought, oh, he'd really pick it up quickly. But his first class, he didn't really pick up capoeira quickly. And it's like that.
right,
It's another story of how no matter what, you could be the best kickboxer, you could be the best whatever. When you move horizontally into another discipline, it's always a learning curve. Even,
right,
you know, like you take the best bare knuckle boxer person, you put them in capoeira, they'll probably still, it's like, oh, I don't know how to flow, right? So, yes,
yeah.
I see what you're saying now. No matter what, the good mentality is the journeyman mentality.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Because, that's the interesting thing is, and I respect and appreciate everyone, but I think there is a tendency once you become an expert or a master at something, especially as we get older, or even young people too, but I think we become comfortable in where we are, and we get unused to being the person who gets, all the feedback and all the criticism
Yeah.
thrown at them. It's not always a nice place to be, to be in the place where you don't know crap.
Yeah.
And then when you become a master, an expert, many people become comfortable at it, and it's like, okay, this is where I know stuff. And few people go outside of their comfort zone and join another practice where they suck, where they're bad. It's like not everybody wants to go through that. And again, I respect that. I think, it makes sense, it's natural. But it's cool also to do the other thing, and to kind of always bring yourself to an understanding that you're never going to be amazing at everything.
Yeah.
It's like there's always, put yourself in a different field and you're going to be the worst guy even if you're the best guy in here. And that reminds us to have humility, which I think is great. And also, yeah, that makes life more interesting because you don't know everything and you understand that you never will know, and that's great because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, whether you do it for body mechanics purposes or self-defense purposes or fight purposes, doing another discipline fight wise will help you if you train it correctly, right? And
Right, right.
I have a hip flexor issue right now, but I've been meaning to make a video. It's like, oh, ideas that you could incorporate capoeira into MMA that I haven't seen too much of, right?
Right.
I promise viewers I will make that video. Just right now, my hip flexor keeps giving me little sensitivities. I got to be careful how I phrase, because the thing is, not everything's an injury, right? Not everything's even a weakness. Sometimes it's just sensitivity. Sometimes it's just soreness. You got to be careful. And this is a topic we could probably talk about for a while too. You got to be careful how you phrase little body ailments, because the mind's very powerful. And sometimes if you don't phrase it correctly, you'll be quote unquote more injured or hurting than you actually are objectively.
Yeah. It's a tough place to be. As you know, I think we have pretty much the same injury, maybe, which is crazy
Probably.
that there's that coincidence. And it's a hard spot for me as well to, because all of my videos that I have planned are based on me physically doing something like training 30 days this or learning with that expert. And when I have the injury, my ability to do that is very limited, and it kind of sucks. But at the same time, I think it's important to respect the injury, and to kind of not make ourselves as a victim out of it, but also to honor it, because I didn't honor it at the beginning. I think it's a common thing to do, but for the first week or so, I was like, this pain, it's just gonna pass, whatever, ignore it. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, okay, this is getting way worse. I don't have a choice now. I have to stop. I wish I stopped earlier, but you live, you learn.
Yeah, that's one of those things about injuries, because before my hip flexor, I had foot weakness and tendonitis on the foot, and I took that very seriously, right? Because I'm like, oh, it's the foot, man. Oh, you know what? And that was really helpful because I strengthened my foot and I don't have foot issues anymore. But the thing with the hip flexor is kind of the same story as you. I've always had issues around the upper leg area, even from Kung Fu, right? And when I fixed my glute, learning that piriformis exercise, I think some people have seen me do on Instagram and other exercises, I was like, oh, this will go away very quickly because look how easily I fixed the other issues. But so I didn't take it seriously initially too. And so now it's like the lingering sensitivity or whatever. I mean, I'm learning good exercises, and I promised Rokas, so I'll promise everyone else that maybe it's a YouTube short or something. I'll show you the one exercise that's been really helping. But still, it's one of those things where, yeah, now that's why I'm much more careful. Like, I have only gone back to capoeira like once or twice since I've had this hip flexor sensitivity or whatever you call it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, injuries suck, and I also recognize I'm getting older, and I guess we all are getting older. And I think I'm starting to come to that place where, 10 years ago, when people would tell me, older people of the age I am right now, or even older ones would tell me like, oh, when you're gonna get my age, you're gonna have this and that. It's like you won't be able to get away without sleeping enough, and like injuries are gonna last forever. And I was like, yeah, keep talking. It's your problem. And I'm like, oh shit, they were 100% right.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so unfortunately they were right. And now everything they told me, that's true. And I'm starting to see that's probably the same with injuries. Injuries occur more often and they last longer, and it sucks, but at the same time it's like I can either hate it and deny it or whatever, and it's still gonna happen, or I can accept it and just become smarter about the way I
Yeah.
train, about
Yeah.
my recovery, about making sure that I keep myself mobile and nimble, and yeah, so just
And
change things.
on the flip side of it, I become that old man sometimes, like really giving it to younger people. You know, like, oh, this, I like 10 years ago when we were on the receiving end of that. Now I'm dishing it out sometimes because you see yourself sometimes in people and
Yeah,
you don't want them making the same mistakes you made 10 years ago, right? So, yeah,
right.
I've definitely been that older borderline condescending guy sometimes now.
Yeah, I
And it
guess.
comes from a good place, right? That's why I'm
Right.
not stopping myself from doing it because imagine if someone really gave me one friend of mine gave me tough love when I was 25, right? And that caused me to shift my career and really do something different, right? I was just sort of hanging around, not doing much. And then a year later, I started fight commentary breakdowns and I was also fully employed and doing everything, right? But imagine someone gave me that tough love when I was 20, right? And then so all my 20s, I was hustling, you know? Like,
Yeah.
Ruckus, you're such an inspiration because, like, you hustle so hard, too. And,
Mhm.
like, I just wish I had a community of people who really, I could look at them and be like, man, even when I don't feel like doing something, look at them doing something. This is awesome, right? So that's what I ultimately try to do when I'm that like older, annoying dude trying to give advice when it was unwarranted. But that's what we're just trying to do. We just don't like seeing people who could have spent 5 years doing something, but they didn't realize until 5 years later, and then they only have the last end of their 20s to do something.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. There's a couple of things that come up for me regarding what you said, but one of them is you mentioned that kind of having those people around you that kind of make you wiser and push you to become better. I was thinking about that quite a bit in the past year or so, where one of the things I miss from running an Aikido dojo, or like being an instructor, is because I knew that everyone is going to be looking up to me. Like I'm the sensei. I'm going to come in there and 20, 30 people are going to sit and look at me and wait for me to give them something valuable. And because I was putting so much focus and attention on Aikido being a personal development practice and kind of a martial arts as a secondary thing, uh, then I was doing my best to give some value about some mindset and or some ways to like life hacks, how to use them. But the thing is, I had a very strict policy that I cannot teach other people or share information about stuff which I haven't dove myself into and I haven't pressure tested and spent a lot of time trying and experimenting with and sharing the results. It's like I think people way too often get into a position where they read a book and they like oh, this is such a great quote, this is such a great strategy, and they haven't even tried it or tried it for 2 days, and they go to other people and it's like, oh, you should try this is amazing, and they keep start tutoring them, and I'm like, oh, wait, well, maybe 2 weeks later you're gonna realize this program actually sucks, and now you're giving me crap. So I was very conscious not to do that. But what that led me to was that I had to be super conscious, and I had to be super conscious about what I learned myself, but also I felt always pushed to be kind of on the edge of my development and evolution because I had to always try new things. I always had to make sure I'm the best possible version that I can be because again, I knew that couple days later I'm going to be with people and they're going to be expecting some cool stuff from me. And that was in a way that was intense to be in that place, but also that pushed me so much to read, to try to experiment, to do courses, and I'm starting to kind of regain that mentality back of always pushing myself to become better. But I almost miss that environment where I'm almost forced to do that, and that's actually one of my visions with the Martial Arts Journey channel, is to focus much more on creating that kind of inspiring journey that people would start to expect that from me, and kind of uh, rely on that to some degree in a positive way. And that's how I would know, like, okay, people are going to be expecting a pretty cool journey that I went through and learned something and discovered something, tried, failed. Like, my MMA fights, a lot of it was for me, but also part of that was for the viewers, for my journeymen, for, as my friend calls my audience, travelers, fellow travelers. It's like I feel the responsibility to put myself into the cage. I'm thinking about having a boxing fight next. is, and again, a lot of it is for me. I want to challenge myself, but I can't deny that a part of it is about knowing that, okay, people, if I will stop and I will give up and I will not fight anymore, there's a possibility that it will affect other people who are expecting that from me, and that'll give kind of a permission for them to. And I'm not saying everybody should fight or like that. That's not my point. But it's about the mentality of pushing forward and challenging yourself versus giving up. And if I would give up, that would probably give the idea that, oh, Rokas gave up, screw that, I can give up as well. And that's not what I want to give. That's not the message I want to put out there. So I'm kind of getting into that space where that kind of, even if it's virtual, I mean, it's easy to forget that real people exist behind comments and emails and messages, because a lot of our work is through the computer. But when I remind myself, actually, you know what, these are real people, and to create that sort of community, even virtually, where we push ourselves to become better, it's a pretty cool idea, and hopefully, that's going to happen more and more in the future.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I started fight commentary breakdowns literally just to remind myself to get back into training, right? But my channel, I think, has had an issue with that, which is that, okay, well, I got back into training. What do I do now? Right? So it's funny that I'm having sort of the same realization. And that's part of the reason why this year I started doing capoeira. I'm like, you know what? Let's do something that maybe other people might not be exposed to or might have stereotypes, which I had stereotypes of capoeira before I started it, right? And I think probably next year that's exactly the direction my channel is going to go more. Like, and Rokas, I have to give credit to you. You've been inspiring me to show more of that. Like, when I started my channel, I was anonymous, right? And then 2020, whether for good or for worse, people convinced me to show my face more. And sometimes I still regret it. But, what Rokas, given complete credit, what he showed me is that, you know what? No, people really want to know. Maybe it's just for their own inspiration, but it's powerful, right? Yeah. And so next year when I explore more martial arts and stuff, I'll show some of that. Like, I haven't showed my capoeira journey too much, but I will. It just, my thing is my personal training. It's so personal, right? And my brand is not really about me, but then everyone tells me, and I'm slowly turning around. Change is hard, but I'm slowly turning around. Like, it is powerful. Like, the channel is about me at the end of the day. And the more it's about me, the more it's probably going to be about the art too, right? So I'm just making that change. I'm just telling you guys, this is a challenge area that I'm working past. So for people that want to know more about me, want to see more of those funny stories, etc., like, it will happen. I'm pushing past a lot of inertia right now. But Rokas has been a really big inspiration in that, and hearing Rokas talk about, his next steps is another big inspiration for me.
Thank you, Jerry. I really appreciate you sharing that. When I'm listening to you, I'm remembering a situation I had back in my Aikido days, and I was still a student, like an uchideshi, a living student in the dojo in Switzerland. So quite a few years ago, quite early in my Aikido career. But I had a good friend who was a fellow Aikido black belt, and I was visiting him in a different city in Switzerland and spending the night at his place. And we were talking like through the whole night, like a bunch of stuff, like bouncing from Aikido to martial arts to like random stuff. But then, quite a while into the conversation, he started to complain to me that he was still like he was one of the instructors in a dojo, but he was kind of like an assistant. He had like a couple classes per week because it just happened that way. And he was complaining to me. He's like, "Damn, these people are like they really want me to teach them. Like they're following me and they're asking me questions and they're trying to copy my style." And I'm like, well, what are you complaining about? Like, what's the problem? Because I wanted that. I was like, I was all about becoming an instructor. But the thing is, he did not initially want to be an instructor. His whole philosophy was he was portraying himself and seeing himself as a ronin, like this guy who's going to different dojos, not committing to one place and trying different styles and kind of being very independent. He had kind of a anarchistic philosophy as part of his life, so he didn't want to be like a leader, and he was complaining about that to me. But I was telling like, dude, look, you're investing way more time into doing this than other people. Like, not everyone has as much passion and time and energy that you invest into Aikido as they do. And so naturally you'll get to a place where you will know stuff and you will embody stuff that others will find desirable, and they will want you to share that, you know. And I said, like, it would be selfish not to. It's like you don't have to go and force them to listen to what you're saying, but if they're asking for information from you, that's kind of your duty to give it. And I think that made him think a lot. And years later, now he even has his own school and he's teaching his own students. I think he switched to ninjutsu, but awesome guy. If you're watching this, Adriano, by the way, kudos to you. But yeah, he eventually owned it and became inspirational. And I think he inspires a lot of his students. But that initial place of him kind of getting naturally into that position of leadership, and a place where people were asking him to share, he wanted to fight against that and push against it. And almost that situation almost reminds me of what you were saying, like, you know, not everyone has a YouTube channel with 200,000 subscribers, and not everyone spends as much time analyzing martial arts and thinking about them, and looking at different perspectives, and they don't have the same mindset that you do. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are interested to get to be a part of that. And so yeah, I think, you know, why not share that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I might need to talk to your friend Adriano. I want to kind of get his journey and kind of learn from him too, because yeah, it just that's just the main thing. And I think for you, Ruckus, when you first started sharing your journey, it took some overcoming inertia, right? I mean, for you, it was a little different because you literally put the sparring up there. So it's like at that point, everyone was going to ask you about where your journey's going, right? So
Sure.
like for you, it's almost like you you almost like parachuted into that. Okay, well, I'm sharing my journey now. That was kind of, so you set yourself up well. It's like, okay, I'm going to parachute your journey. So here's the plan then. Potentially, this is potentially a teaser then. I'm going to go to a kickboxing school. Shout out Coach Nico, and I might try some capoeira. And I'm probably going to get beat up. It's not going to be hard sparring because I got braces, right? But maybe that's going to be my parachute into the moment. I'm going to go to a kickbox school. I featured them before. I've already told Coach Nico I'm going to try some capoeira moves. Let's see how well or not well they work. That could be the first step in showing, hey, can this capoeira Jerry's been doing for like 6 months or 8 months, can it actually potentially work like he pictures it in his mind against someone non-compliant, right?
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I think that's going to be great. And also there is definitely an element of being for an element of that being inspirational, because again, as I spoke before, like so many people, they stick to their art, they stick to their practice, they don't pressure test, they don't cross train,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't expose themselves to these challenges. But I think it's very awesome when somebody does that, and as you mentioned, even does it publicly, where it's like, okay, I don't know what's going to even happen myself, but I'm curious, like after training this hard for this amount of time, I'm going to go to this place. And I'm sure that influences people and makes them think as well, like, you know what, why am I've been training capoeira for, like, let's say, 2 years, and I'm not going to kickboxing classes. I should be more like Jerry. And so I think, yeah, I think that's awesome if we can influence each other in such a way.
And I just texted Coach Nico. I told him I'm giving him a shout out in this. So that's an extra commitment device, right? This is a thing from
Oh yeah,
game
yeah,
theory.
absolutely.
This is like, okay, now I'm really going to do it.
100%.
I mean,
100%.
because they spar in a very technical way. They're not trying to hurt you, right? Which is one of the things you got to be careful if you go to new gyms. But I've known them since 2018, so I know, like, they know, okay, Jerry's just here having a little fun. Also, humble him if you want, but don't hurt him, especially because he has braces. So it should be a really fun little exploration. Especially Coach Nico's really big, so then there's also a size element, like, would you be able to pull off these because if I spar against a little kid, of course I can pull off capoeira, right? But you want to really pressure yourself. And Coach Nico, if you can't even hit him back, what do? You circle around him with all your capoeira moves? Are you going to tire yourself out in 2 minutes? These are all things to kind of play with, and I guess we'll get that filmed.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool, and that's interesting too, because there's so much which can happen in our head. Like I had my idea, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the keto sparring, I'm gonna try this and try that. Maybe this is gonna work like that, and until you try, you don't know.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what pressure testing is all about. You try, and you're like, oh, actually, it's like this, and I
Yeah.
thought it's gonna be like this. and that makes us more knowledgeable and kind of gives us wisdom in the future. We can become more realistic in our expectations and even, change things up and improve things. And that's kind of interesting for me as well because right now going to focus a bit more again on looking back at Aikido and doing more cross training with Aikido. And actually, I don't know when this video is going to be released. Probably not tomorrow, right? So because as we're speaking now, it's a Saturday and tomorrow's Sunday. Actually, my next video I'm releasing a sparring of Kudo versus Aikido, and
Ooh.
Kudo is, for people who don't know, I call it one of the most extreme martial arts out there because it involves headbutts and elbows and knees and throws, and it's pretty badass. And this time I went because I did that before. I tried just like had an experience, an introduction to Kudo and a sparring. But this time I went in as a former Aikido practitioner, cross training in other martial arts now, and we did a sparring with the Kudo instructor. I try to apply the Aikido, and it's funny because I'm starting to see there's a buildup of a story because over the years, and a lot of it I'm documenting. Like I tried my Aikido versus Judo, I tried my Aikido versus BJJ, and then I would explore with these guys like, okay, how could we improve this technique? How can we improve that technique? And I'm starting to pick up things which start to work, like Aikido-esque or Aikido originally techniques, like how to really make them work in sparring. And now I have more sparring experience because that's essential, that's necessary. Without the sparring experience, it's super difficult to pull off any technique. But I have a number of techniques which are more functional than they were. I tried them, and then with the Kudo coach, then I asked him to try to improve my techniques, the ones which didn't work, because he's so knowledgeable, and Kudo is all about incorporating other martial arts and making them work. And then I tried those same techniques with his one of his students who doesn't know what's coming because now he's more knowledgeable, and so I'm not going to spoil what happens, but that was the whole journey of doing that. And one of the reasons I'm bringing that up is because again, there's part of the process is thinking what's going to work and then it not potentially working out. But then my mistake at the beginning was that I figured that it doesn't work, period. And I tried to make it work for a little bit of time. It still didn't work. And then it was like, okay, this doesn't work, forget about it. But now what I'm seeing is that there's a journey there. Like, I don't think the goal is to reinvent Aikido, to make it functional. I think, Aikido is what it is. It doesn't have to be something else. There's other martial arts which do a great job at what they're doing, but it's still an interesting exercise to take a look at those techniques, considering that potentially they were effective sometime back in the day, like in the samurai years or in the older Japanese times. These techniques were probably taught for a reason, and they probably worked in that scenario. So it's interesting to look and say, okay, you know what? It didn't work the first time. It didn't work the second time. It doesn't mean it's not going to work in the 10th, 20th, or 30th time. And that's funny too to realize that for me is because the same wouldn't be true. Like if somebody would teach me a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu technique in a lousy way, like in a non-functional way, and I would train it for 5 years, but it was like not really the way it should be applied, and then I would go to spar legit BJJ people. And I think that happens to traditional jiu-jitsu guys, Japanese jiu-jitsu guys. They know techniques, but they don't know the application. They go to BJJ school and like advanced white belt just destroys them. And they're like, oh no, my traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu doesn't work. And it's like, well, maybe the way you learned it doesn't work. But then, the fact that you got destroyed doesn't yet mean it's not efficient whatsoever. So that's kind of the whole process of what I'm thinking about these days, and I'm curious to go deeper into it, to do more cross training and asking experts more, like, okay, how can we make this work? It's kind of a cool exploration.
So I got two thoughts. I'll save the Aikido thought second because what
Sure.
I'm really observing, hearing how you think about things now, this is something that I have to give credit to viewer Miles, who, by the way, guys, if you talk to someone on Instagram, it's Miles that's managing my Instagram. But he keeps telling me about the hero's journey, right? Joseph Campbell's
Right.
hero's journey. And what Rokas is really good at, just hearing him talk about how he frames things is it's very good at explaining it from a hero's journey view. There's a reason why stories are structured around it. If you're familiar with Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of how Hollywood screenplays are done, Act 1, you have certain assumptions, etc. But then there's a point, there's a turning point where it's like, oh, things have changed. They've gone this way, they've gone that way. Now I'm on this journey, right? And the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 story structures very much a simplification of the hero's journey. But what Rokas was talking about, and what I'm learning from you, Rokas, is how I can structure this video, because I'm committed now to testing capoeira against kickboxing, how I should probably do a video soon talking about my assumptions and what I think I might be able to pull off. And then so that way I don't just have the footage of me sparring, I'll have certain like behind the scenes, adhering more to the hero's journey that makes it relatable to everyone. So I'm learning on the spot from Rokas right now. That's what I'm showing people. So that's my first thing. Okay. Second thing about Aikido, Rokas. I'm going to do an Aikido video hopefully at the end of this year. So one of my neighbors has an older sister who used to be a soccer player. And her training in soccer, I forgot what position she played. I think she was defense. But she seems to really understand certain Aikido principles without me ever having to explain it to her. So I kind of want to show that on camera. So that's potentially what I could add to the Aikido conversation. So I will keep you posted. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that will happen. But yeah, basically just seeing how she can naturally. So soccer players, her mentality, especially being defense, she's almost trying to form a protective bubble and box you out from the ball that she's trying to protect, right? So that sort of expansive energy, if you use it right, you can feel it when she's connecting her body to you. It's really cool. And I've never felt that before from an athlete in that way. Yeah. So, yeah. And she's also really cute, so that'll be a bonus.
Oh, that's a lot of extra points. We're branching out to a couple of directions that I kind of actually want to respond to both of them, but I'll start with the Aikido thing. So it is interesting for me that the principles of Aikido and the philosophy of Aikido, what it's supposed to be, I think to some degree, and that's what the founder also spoke about. Apparently there are stories where he would look at rivers and mountains and take inspiration from nature into developing the martial art that he's doing. So the whole idea is that there are inherent principles and aspects which exist as they are, and you can tap into them. And I think it's very much possible. Like I remember I showed my BJJ coach some of the Aikido techniques, and without ever doing Aikido, he did them better than I did, because he's been spending years in developing understanding of the joints and pressure and how techniques work. And so he saw the techniques and he's like, oh, this is the way you can do it. I'm like, you know what, I'm the third degree Aikido black belt, but you're doing them better than I do. But because he has the fundamental understanding. So I wouldn't be surprised if some fighters, for example, also use Aikido principles such as stepping out of the attack line, blending with the attacker, even without calling it Aikido or knowing that it has anything to do with Aikido, but they tap into those inherent principles. So that's my Aikido thought. And the whole hero's journey that you mentioned, I'm a big fan of the hero's journey. I love the hero's journey, and the more I'm the older I get, the more I'm interested in storytelling and understanding the power of stories, because I love movies, I love graphic novels, and they're all about stories. But what is fascinating, and it's something I reflected about after doing this specific YouTube course, but also after reading a brilliant book, and I actually can't tell the name right now, but it's an amazing book about storytelling, and it's a guy who goes to these kind of jam sessions, or the way I'm imagining it's like almost like a stand-up comedy stand-up club, but people come up and they tell stories in a limited time, and then everybody rates these stories, and somebody wins the evening. And he's like the ultimate champion of telling stories, and they're all stories about his life, about the stuff he experienced. And in his book, he explains how he tells the stories that they become so interesting, and how. But the coolest part about that is he really points out that we all have our stories. We all are living through some amazing stuff, but we just don't necessarily pick it up. We don't necessarily think about them in that structure of a hero's journey or a three act story, but they're all around us. Like even in the YouTube course I mentioned, my YouTube mentor, he was telling that some YouTube channels which are tutorial channels, like let's say cooking channel, they struggle thinking like, oh, how could I make a story out of this? There's no story. I'm just making pasta. But there is a story. Like for example, my wife loves pasta and I want to make a pasta dish, but I never made a pasta dish and I think I may screw this up. But I really want to surprise her on our, anniversary. I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna go to the store. I'm gonna buy the ingredients and I try and I fail. I call someone for help and like there's all of these things are happening, but we don't track them in our mind. We don't think about them. We think only about, oh, I'm making pasta. But stuff is happening around all the time. And it's something I'm thinking about also incorporating into my channel and into my videos too, where so much happens in between and before in the planning phase of the videos and after the filming the videos. And sometimes I think I'm guilty of just sharing like, okay, this is what happened in the dojo. But it's like, no, actually, I struggled and I had to go through hell to make this video happen. And then we had some amazing exchanges with the guy, and like that person is maybe like an amazing personality, and people would benefit from knowing that person more and not only their martial arts skills. And so I'm starting to look for those stories more, what are happening in my life, and planning to add them more into my videos. But I think it's the crucial element of what I'm speaking about is looking at your life more and trying to pick those stories up that are happening and structuring them in our minds, because that makes life essentially so much more cooler and empowers us, because we start to realize like, man, actually cool stuff is happening and I just didn't think about it that way, and actually I am on a hero's journey, and this is the thing that I'm missing, and this is the next thing that I should do. This is where I should challenge myself and fight the dragon. But until I look at it that way, maybe I don't even recognize there's a dragon in my life that I could conquer. So yeah, stories and looking at the stories in our lives, I think, can be super powerful.
And applying what you're telling me, I should talk about the physical therapy exercise I'm doing to strengthen my
Sure.
hip flexor, right? This is part of me going to the kickboxing gym is I have sort of an injury and I'm
Right.
still going to get past it, get the courage to go. So that should be in the video. That
Yeah.
should be in the video. So this is, guys, if you can't tell, I'm getting really inspired recently, and Rokas has been really inspiring me, especially encouraging me. So if this video, not if, when, I'm not saying if, there's no if. When this video gets out, a lot of that personal journey stuff will be inspired by Rokas and Miles. So seriously, Rokas,
And
thank you, man. Like, just sometimes you need to hear it multiple times in different ways to
sure.
understand, oh, this is what, since it's on my mind, other people are going to care about it too. It's that simple. If my hip flexor is getting strengthened, people want to know, okay, how's that going to help your capoeira journey? How's it going to help you spar Coach Nico, right? It's,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And also too, I want to add that's so relatable too.
yeah,
Like we all have injuries and we
yeah,
all struggle overcoming them. And especially as martial arts enthusiasts, it's really hard to have an injury when doing martial arts is a habit. It's
yeah.
something you always, you're looking forward to, and you do it like every once, like regularly, a few days per week, and then suddenly when you get injured, that just disappears from your life, and it's so much easier to to, to get down because of that, to kind of become depressed, and we feel alone in that oftentimes because not everybody speaks about their injuries or their experiences. But when you see someone going through that and you hear how they feel and how they overcome it, then it makes us feel like, oh, actually, you know what? Actually, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I will overcome this as well. And yeah, I think it's easier. It's much easier when we're all in this together. But being all of us together in this is a lot about sharing and knowing that actually that's happening. And too often we don't share the hard things we have in our lives, and then everybody thinks like, oh, everybody else's life is amazing and my life, I'm the only one that has a crappy situation in my life. But probably more closer to the truth is the fact that everyone struggles, but we just didn't know about it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mm.
Man, and that goes back to something in college. So in college, I made a documentary and I won an award, right? And I never broke down why it happened. I'm being honest with you. I kind of just let that slide. It's like, okay, it's something cool I did in college. I mean, it inspired me to keep making content. But at the end of the day, what was really good about that? It was a hero's journey, right? And like, yeah, it's there's a lot to think about here. There's definitely a lot to think about here because um we also there, a lot of it is also okay. How much vulnerability do you want to show, right? And Rokas is the king of that. I mean, Rokas has really championed that, and yeah, it's there's a lot to follow up on definitely. So this conversation is definitely not over because as I start exploring and diving into this, there's a lot more. Like I think about, for example, how I'm gonna show the kettlebell exercise I do, right? And the one thing is where I am right now, where I'm doing this interview of Rokas, I don't have enough space, so I'm gonna have to do it publicly. I'm gonna have to show that exercise publicly, which is like ah. But then you got to think of it another way. It's like very few people know that exercise, so at the end of the day, nobody's judging, and if they're judging, they think it's cool. That's the thing. Like it's just little things that as you get older, you gotta like remind yourself, like how you were younger. Bring some of that back when you didn't care. You know, you gotta, there's just yeah. There's a lot to break down here, but at the end of the day, I think the title of this interview will be "Getting Really Inspired by Rokas for Martial Arts Journey." I think that's what I'm gonna title this.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. It's cool to hear because inspiration is actually one of the key words for me. So it's
yeah.
really cool to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And as a sort of teaser too, I'll tell you, I'm gonna talk to DW Brown. DW Brown was an actor in one of my favorite movies, and he's actually a purple belt in jiu-jitsu now under Hicks and Gracie. So he's gonna be a future person that we're gonna talk to. I'm gonna give him a shout out because one of the things I wanted to do, just learning more, right? I'm learning to make the sound better for Zoom calls. So Rokas and I are trying certain settings. And so I told DW Brown that I'm going to use this talk to see if these little quote unquote sound hacks I learned are actually working. So yeah, lots of interconnected. See, I'm trying to create a narrative right now. So
yeah, I also wanted to add up to what you said about vulnerability, and I think that's an important aspect too, because we're oftentimes taught not to be vulnerable. We're kind of the all about winning and being the best and not showing our weaknesses. But the thing is, again, we all have them, and for me, I do my best to be very open about my struggles and the vulnerabilities that I have because again, as I mentioned, inspiration is important for me. And I think if I'm not going to be transparent with people and I'm not going to share how I struggle sometimes and how I overcome these difficulties, then, how can we expect to inspire each other? But on the other hand, there's also that part of vulnerability where you mentioned it's not easy to do something publicly. And for me, because I have a Lithuanian conditioning, my native country, we're very much about keeping to ourselves, not kind of sticking out and not showing off. And so, because of that conditioning, because I grew up like that, if for a long time it was very difficult for me to take out a camera and do some vlogging as I walk, as I go, and I did that on multiple occasions, but I always struggled, and it kept getting easier doing it again and again. I'm still not, don't feel super natural doing it. Like some people, like my wife, she's 5 years younger than me, so maybe part of it is maybe she's more of the newer generation, and also she's a stage person, singer. So I don't know what's the real reason behind her, but for her to take out a phone and to film herself and to talk to the phone like in public and so on, she doesn't even think that there's an issue there. Like she doesn't, there's no thought about her like, oh, this is weird, or I don't feel comfortable. Like she doesn't even think about it. For me, I have to overcome a certain level of uncomfort, thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna annoy other people, and I'm gonna bring away their attention from whatever they're doing. And in many cases, that's not true. I think people are much more accepting, and or they don't care. We're so much in our heads thinking that that's the case versus that being reality. But fact is that I have to overcome this type of thinking in myself and to be like, okay, you know what, this is not gonna be easy, but I will put the camera here and I will speak to the camera in public, or I will go and ask this person a question, And but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So it's, it's not, yeah, there's a solution there.
Yeah, exactly. And just build the habit, right? Because in my younger years with other channels, I definitely made it more about me, right? But what made Fight Commentary Breakdowns different and what gave me that continued fuel to keep going was that it was not about me, but it doesn't mean you can't bring some more of that into it, right? And that's I think that's the key that talking to you and talking to Miles especially, I'm just really gonna play around with more. And at the end of the day, man, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think about. So, but Ruckus, so let's talk more about your journey right now. So, we talked about your event. We talked about some of your future videos. We also talked about the injuries that you and I are facing. What else is in your journey? Like, what martial arts are you looking at? How is the existing martial arts practice, etc.? So tell me what the day in the life of Ruckus. For example, do you talk to Oliver and Jesse Antcamp every day? Like, what is it like to be Ruckus?
Sure. Well, there's a bunch of answers there, but so in regards to my martial arts journey, so right now I'm injured, so that's a different story. But if I go back a month before I got injured, right now I'm on a journey of focusing on boxing. After I lost my second MMA fight, I realized I'm missing some fundamentals. I learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I spent a bunch of time training kickboxing, but actually those are not necessarily, these are parts of MMA, but I skipped through and jumped through kickboxing. It focuses on the top and the bottom, the legs, the kicks, and the hand strikes. But then if you're focusing your attention on both of these at the same time, you're gonna learn 50% here, 50% here, or even worse because you're going back and forth. Versus if you learn pure boxing, there's no way to go around that. Like you have to outperform the other person only by striking with your hands, moving with your upper torso, and using footwork. So that my idea, my philosophy was that if I become good at boxing, that will force me to develop these particular skills, and then I can add kicks and master my kicks better, and then I will be more of a complete fighter. And I spoke to a bunch of people, and a lot of people are telling me that that's probably true. Like I heard a number of people who told that once they mastered boxing, their kickboxing just became way better. So that's plan A, which I'm focusing on right now. Then later, because I learned jiu-jitsu, which is so much on the ground, but then jiu-jitsu struggles often in the stand-up area about on takedowns. Like jiu-jitsu people are usually not the best there. They're more better on the ground. And so I realized I know some takedowns, but like I want to as well isolate the skills of wrestling because that's all about takedown. That's all about that explosive, fast movement, chaining techniques together. And so again, I want to go to the people who do it best, become comfortable with them, and then come back to jiu-jitsu and then continue learning what I already have some skills with. So that's my future plan. But right now, all about boxing. I'm training boxing 6 days per week. That's before I got injured. That's maybe why I got injured. Sometimes it's strength and conditioning directed to boxing. Sometimes it's hard sparring. Sometimes it's technical training. Sometimes I take private lessons, do additional training. So I do my best to be really committed. Thinking about having a few boxing fights. If I wouldn't have gotten injured, I might have had a fight fairly soon. Now it's probably going to get postponed, but life is hopefully not as short as it may be. So that probably will happen later in the future. So that's kind of my personal martial arts journey. I spend, training 6 times per week. That's takes quite a lot of time plus recovery. So yeah, that's a big part of my day. Obviously not martial arts journey, but I'm a married man now, and I do my best to take the relationship as a priority as well. One of the mistakes I did in my previous relationship was that I thought that, yeah, there's my life and there's the relationship, which kind of happens by itself in between. And my lesson was like, no, actually, if I focus on, let's say, my martial arts training and my YouTube channel as a thing, as a priority that I dedicate time to, like, okay, like Monday I'm gonna train at 6, and Tuesday, and then at 5 I'm gonna do a video, whatever. Then that the relationship should be incorporated as well. It's not like, oh, I have some free time, I'm gonna speak to my wife. Obviously that happens sometimes, but it's like, no, we haven't went to a date for a while. We haven't spoken for a while. Let's schedule in some time. Let's go for a walk together. Let's eat dinner together, whatever. So that's part of my life too, the relationship. And then obviously there's the YouTube channel, and I'm super inspired about it now because I was thinking a lot about it, doing a lot of research, learning about YouTube, thinking about what I want to give through my channel and through my content. And again, as I mentioned, I'm super inspired about it because I'm starting to realize what my channel is really about. It took me like 5 years. And but I think my mistake in the past was I was doing too many things on my channel. Like I was, here's an Aikido video where I test Aikido and I try to make it work, and here's like a ranking martial arts video, and here's a questioning martial arts video, and they're all kind of connected, but it was all over the place, where I want to become more focused on the journey aspect, focus on bringing up certain challenges in my life, documenting how I overcome them, how I tackle them, spending more time again looking back at Aikido, testing it, cross-training other martial arts, and again focusing so much more on storytelling and sharing my story as I go through these experiences, and putting myself in positions and situations where I would experience cool things that would be worth sharing versus like, nothing is happening in my life and I'm going to make a story about that. It's like, that's not the point. It's like, what's the coolest thing? What's the coolest journey I could go on to right now? Go on that journey, challenge myself, push myself to the limits, learn my lessons, and then deliver it as content. Because as I mentioned before, like inspiration, since I was a teen, the short story of that period of my life was that I struggled because I wasn't thinking in the same way that everybody else does. Like maybe I was more mature for my age, and I was looking at life in a different way that I had friends, I could relate with people, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I belong, especially in high school. Like I was like, this is too structured for me. I want more freedom, and I didn't know what to do for university, and I had insomnia, and for a couple of years I wasn't in a good place. But then I would read articles about cool people who did cool stuff because internet was kind of still just developing. There wasn't so much online as these days. So I would go and read newspapers and articles and books, and I would learn stories about people who went out of their comfort zone, did something super cool, and that inspired me to believe like, oh man, they did it. That makes me believe I can do too. That I could achieve more in my life. That whatever things I dream of, that's actually possible. And I felt immensely grateful to those people, even though I never met, the majority of them. I also met a number of people in my life as well, like some businessmen, or like I remember like I went to see a Christian monk, then a Buddhist monk, and I would talk to them. I would try to learn from them, and they inspired me as well. And I thought at that stage, like later in my life, when I will figure my shit out, when I will have my head on my head will be more in a more proper place, and I will know what's what better than I do now. I kind of committed myself to being the person that these people were to me back at that day, at the time, because like they helped me out by inspiring me, and I want to inspire others who are maybe in a similar position that I was in the past. And it just feels meaningful as well to do that, and it's cool to have more meaning than less in our lives. And I think I did that through my content in a number of situations, kind of sharing my journey and hopefully inspiring other people. But I think I can do that much better, and present it in a more clear way, and focus on that much more, and challenge myself, as we spoke before, to make sure that I keep myself on the edge of my evolution, that I would keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone, learning new things, and that would become an experience for not only me but also for other people, and hopefully make others' lives better. So yeah, I think that's what my mind is, where my mind is at right now.
Yeah, so this is great, and I wrote down a bunch of things because I didn't want to interrupt you while you were
Yeah,
talking. So this is my strategy. It's like I tell people too, when someone's talking, let them talk, because if you interrupt them, the flow will completely change. So I wrote down 4 points, and I'm going to go reverse order. The
yeah,
first thing that came to mind, the issue with doing too much on the channel, right? I think that's something that a lot of us are continually refining, because when it started out, your channel's been around longer than my channel, but when it started out, as long as you were a martial arts channel, I think the audience were cool with it, right? But as the martial arts world grew and more information, more channels, you had to focus more. You couldn't just be a martial arts channel anymore. You had to have a specific angle, right? And that's something that kind of I've had a challenge with. It's like, well, what's my angle, right? And focusing on the Chinese stuff is not always fun for me, and it gets repetitive for my audience. I know, another Tai Chi master gets beat up. I think 90% of people after watching 5 or 6 of them are like, okay. Some people still enjoy it. Other people will still be like, Jerry, you're just a hater. I want to see, But like 90% of people will be like, okay, I get it now, But so that's something I definitely struggled with. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that too. It's like you sometimes feel like, okay, well, where is my focus, right? Which then leads to you talk about inspiration. And as you're talking about how do you both inspire yourself and through it inspire other people, at the end of the day, why do people follow us, right? That goes back to that question. Why do they want to talk to us on Facebook? Why do they want to talk to us on Instagram? And very likely they are looking for inspiration. Sometimes maybe they're looking for camaraderie, but part of looking for camaraderie is inspiration. So that actually gives me another way to think about social media, because part of the reason I stopped being on Instagram was I don't want to talk to people anymore. I'm just being truthful. But then it's like, well, how do you channel that energy that these people want to talk to you? Well, how do you then focus them into your video and show your journey, right? So that's what you're kind of showing me too. It's like, well, at the end of the day, if they feel inspired by watching your video, maybe they won't talk to you as much on Instagram because they can get it on YouTube. You know what I mean? I'm thinking in a very funny, like, tongue-in-cheek way, but like there is a point to all this, and that's what I'm learning from talking to you. So that inspiration angle, I'm definitely gonna sit on and kind of continue thinking about. The thing you talked about 6 days a week, right? Training boxing 6 days a week. Funny story. How I started getting issues was because one time I pushed myself to train capoeira 6 days a week. My body was not the same after that. So, same thing. It's the 6 days a week formula. You got to be very careful, especially when it's something that's really brutal on the body, which is boxing or capoeira or jiu-jitsu, wrestling. Oh, when you start diving into wrestling, Rokas, be careful of 6 days a week.
Maybe 5.
And then the final thing, I really liked what you said about how you learned from relationships and how the wife is on the journey with you, right? It's not like, okay, I make time for a relationship and then my YouTubing is my thing. And then, like the analogy that came to mind as you were talking about it was you got to be on the same train, right? It's not like parallel trains and once in a while you jump on that train and then she jumps. You got to be on the same train, right? That's one of the pieces of advice they give to people. This is how friendships stay together. This is how families can, stay cool. This is how marriages stay together. It's almost like you have to have a mission statement. You got to be like, okay, we all need to get from A to B. Are we all getting from A to B together? Or, I'm going to use my hand. Or is it more going this way, right? If you're going this way, chances are the friendship, the family, the relationship's not going to really last, right? So hopefully you're going like this together. And that's something, hearing you talk about it, I'm seeing it in practice. You have to figure out how to be on the same page in many things, especially the direction in life. So, yeah, this is great. There's a lot of great things that hearing from other people, but seeing you putting it into practice too.
Yeah. I mean, again, you tackled also so many things, but you finished up with relationships, and relationships and relationship, the wife and husband relationship for me is very important. As I said, I failed at that in the past and learned my lesson that you can't take it for granted. You can't think it's like, oh, that's a natural thing that happens by itself. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about it, reading books about relationship, and just being very proactive in making sure that it's a healthy relationship. But I also noticed, like, I'm speaking to my friends and they have relationships. I'm talking to my wife and she shares about the stories of her girlfriends and what struggles they have. And way too often I notice situations where people choose incompatible partners, and I don't think they're perfect people for us. Like, I don't think you can find like, oh, that person is perfect for me and we're gonna be happy forever. I think that's not what we're looking for either. but also like my previous relationship, which again it was, you know, a failed relationship in the end, but I learned a lot from it. Uh, a big problem was, I think we had, like you mentioned, that mission statement, having like a communal mission statement, a shared mission statement, and that if you don't have that together with the other person, if that fundamental is not there, your mission statement is different, or you have some fundamental beliefs that are different, I think sometimes opposites can attract. But if there's too many opposites on a very basic fundamental level, like I know from my personal experience, that can create a hell for both people. And it's like not really, to a degree, it's not nobody's fault, but it's like you got together with a person where I noticed that situation where I experienced that myself too, but I see other people struggling with that. Let's say like a very basic thing. Let's say I wouldn't like the way my wife dresses, like the clothes she wears, or vice versa. She wouldn't like me, and then I would constantly ask her like, "Oh, could you wear something else?" It's like I don't really like the way you dress, and it's like, you know, what does that tell to her? First of all, it tells like you're not the way I like you, like you're not the person I like. I prefer you the other way. So it's like my question is like, so why are you two guys together to begin with? And this is like a simple thing. We're talking about clothes, right? But the same happens with, let's say like one person doesn't like going out partying on the weekends and the other person loves it, and the one person forces the other to go, and it's like, wouldn't it be better if you would find someone who loves to party as well, and you would go to party all the time, and you know, or you know, like and again, you can't be on the same page at every situation, but I just noticed it's a problem when two people get together who are quite different and they expect each other to be different than they are. It's like, I want you to be this way for me to like you. And of course, we have to change to some degree. It's like we're not perfect, so we have to become better in some regards, but we also have to accept each other the way we are. So there's a fine balance. But again, I think you mentioning that having a shared mission statement, for me, that's also about being on the same page and finding a person who you click with, and then you know, you struggle and you have some conflicts, and you learn to balance each other out, but fundamentally you're on the same page. You're just dealing with some things on the surface, versus if you're on a fundamentally different page, and then as I went through that myself, it just becomes a hell of a thing. So this is not really martial arts, but since we spoke about
Yeah.
relationships, yeah,
It is in a way about martial arts too, right? Because a lot of the journey in whatever, whether it's relationships or living your best life, can be applied. A lot of the learnings can be applied to martial arts, right? From a training aspect, who you surround yourself, etc. You know, like the funny analogy I was giving myself when you were talking about this. Imagine me with like one of these bullshido push hands Tai Chi people. You know, like there's a reason I don't hang out with them, even if I tried, right?
yeah,
Fundamentally, there's just certain things that we share that just don't
that's a good point.
click. So how am I gonna hang out with them? You know, like that's kind of a funny example, but it is true.
Yeah,
Like
it's a good one.
if they're gonna put on a pedestal a dude who's 300 pounds who pushes little kids by muscling, we're not gonna be friends. It's that simple, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I
Yeah.
think, you know, that also applies to the relationship of friendships as well. I think it's important to have people like good friends who would push you, who would tell you if you're, you know, if you're doing something crappy, that they would be honest with you and they would tell you that, and they would give you feedback. But then at the same time, you still have to also ideally be, so again, you have to have some differences in thinking to challenge each other and to kind of balance each other out. But also, if you're on the fundamental level on in a very different place, it's it's likely that I do see friendships like that sometimes. People spend way too much time with people who are not good for them.
Yeah.
You know, they're not teaching them the right lessons. They're not necessarily, and again, you know, this is becoming philosophical, but sometimes you have to like experience crap in order to become better. But I don't think you have to have too much crap in your life. I shouldn't. I think enough crap happens on its own. You don't have to put yourself with crappy people
Yeah.
consciously to learn, you know, all the lessons in life
Yeah.
that's possible.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but but being conscious about the people you spend time with, and finding the people who are good for you, and you know, they're not, again, I'm not saying like they're not yes sayers who are just like, oh, you're the best. It's like, no, just proper people who you're on the same page with, but you also challenge each other. So that's why one of the reasons why I'm pretty picky when it comes to the people I spend my time with, and for the better and worse. But I can speak to anyone, I can hang out with anyone and spend time together. That's not a problem. But the people who I repeatedly meet and spend time with, that's I try to be conscious about who I give my time to, because time is limited. Our life is limited. Our timing in this life is limited. And if I will spend most of my time with people who I don't really enjoy spending time with, who are not really good for me, and people who don't benefit even from my company either, then what's the point? I could do better things.
Yeah. And turning this full circle, some of the reason why older people try so hard to give advice, in a way, they're doing this. They're signaling, they might not tell you, but the subtext behind it is, hey, right now I'm not really enjoying your company. I'm trying to help you out, so if we were to continue this relationship, we can inspire each other more. It's not always why they're doing it, but sometimes that's what they're doing. So that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes they're looking out for you, but they're also looking out for themselves, because like Rokas says, time is limited, man. And if they're feeling like not just you're not inspiring them, but maybe you're dragging them down, maybe they don't want to hang out with you anymore. So in a way, it's almost like a veiled little, warning's the wrong word, but it's like a veiled little warning. It's like, hey man, get your stuff together a little bit. I expect you to be good. That's why we even started talking, right? Like, you got to think like that. So, like I say, I can get philosophical too. So I like riffing like this. Like Rokas has another channel where he like talked more philosophical about stuff, right? And so one day, if I ever get back on this stuff, I think Rokas and I can have like a deep life conversation, or like talk about the hero's journey. Yeah.
She's waved and
yeah, I saw. Does she have a YouTube channel, by the way?
No, she's a singer. So, well, I guess she does.
Hi,
Yeah,
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We were speaking about you, so we can, you can go now. She doesn't have like a proper YouTube channel as a content creator, but she's a singer and working on her career. So she has a YouTube channel where she puts out her songs, and the majority of them are in our native tongue. But yeah, she does her thing. We definitely find a lot of things we share, and kind of parallels in our journeys and in our careers, where we inspire each other in various ways, and understand each other. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Rokas, I think this is actually a pretty cool place to end off. We talked for about an hour and a half. Good thing we budgeted more time. I think an hour would have been a little short, so I'm glad we did an hour and a half. You have really inspired me, Rokas. I mean this from the bottom of my heart, and I'm really looking forward to your event. I'm gonna call it the Squid Games of the martial arts world, right? I think it's a pretty cool.
I haven't thought about it that way, but
yeah, you can take this. You can take that phrase, use it. The Squid Game of the martial arts world, and Rokas is the Mr. Beast of the martial arts world.
Well, Mr. Beast is super inspiring for me. So one day I could get at least somewhere to that level, that would be awesome. But
yeah, he's been inspiring me so much. For those of you wondering, Rokas and I have talked a lot about some of the advice that Mr. Beast gave. So like we really have been trying to learn a lot from him.
Yeah, Jimmy's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So Rokas, let's definitely do more conversations, especially as it gets closer and closer to your event. So we can do something like this again, like talk about the event and then talk about our journey, and if we want, riff about life too. I think this is a cool format.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you for the great questions, and for the conversation, for sharing your perspective, and for being honest about your experience. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Coach Nico, Coach Olive, I guess I'm committing. Rokas, Rokas put himself out there. I'm going to put myself out there. Well, we're going to see it.
Yeah, I have no doubt that's going to happen now. That's it. Yeah. You have to do it. Just make sure you respect your injury.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And there's definitely going to be footage about that too. And yes, so for those of you watching, guys, Rokas from Martial Arts Journey. Thank you, Rokas. And I will just put, I don't care about outbound links anymore. I'll put a link to his Indiegogo. Final thing, Rokas, since we're talking about this, I don't think, trusting what Jimmy Mr. B says, I don't think outbound links matter as much as inbound links. So what I mean is, YouTube has changed the definition of what a view is, right? Now, the watch time has to be over 30 seconds on a video for it to officially count as a view. So what that means is inbound links will hurt you. If someone from Facebook just clicks on your video, but they don't watch 30 seconds, not only is that view not tracked within the YouTube algorithm way of like, oh no, this is recommended, this is suggested, we want to know what causes what, it's also creating clicks or playbacks that don't count as views. So I think that's why it's extra disincentivized to try to promote stuff outside of the organic reach of YouTube.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
that's just my thought right now. Like my most recent video, the reason it even beat 100,000 views finally, I haven't had a video like that in a while, is because I didn't share it anywhere. I used to be so passionate about sharing it everywhere because I'm like, oh my God, I gotta care, you know, oh my God, I'm so excited to share things. But then let YouTube do it for you. There's a reason they're $1 billion industry, however much. Let them share it for you. You don't share it. You just, if people want to talk about it, share. Tell them, go find it. Don't share the links.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking about. I don't know if that's true, but that's my hypothesis that's been slightly tested. Yeah. Oh man, thank you so much, Rokas.
Thank you, Jerry. This was awesome.
Yep.